There's a very persistent idea in spiritual circles, even in very, let's say, advanced or experienced spiritual circles, that we need to do something in order to awaken. That we need to go somewhere, be with the right teacher, be in the right place, at the right time, doing the right method, the right meditation. Or even that we ought to be feeling something specific. That's a very tricky one. That in order to awaken we should be feeling bliss or peace or happiness or whatever it may be. And this can be a very subtle idea that we're not even aware is driving the momentum of our own seeking. Yeah, as long as there's a seeking for something other than what is here, now, however it appears, that seeking mechanism will keep that seeking going. And this mythical moment of awakening never happens. It's tricky. And it's persistent. And it's necessary. It's like the grit in the oyster that makes a pearl. Without the drive to seek something, and when that seeking is turned inwards to the spiritual search, without that, then nothing changes, nothing transforms. And at the same time, that whole seeking mechanism needs to be sacrificed. So it's kind of a paradox for the mind anyway, a conundrum for the mind. And what I'm really speaking of is surrender. This very overused word in spirituality, surrender. And yet the depth and profundity of its, not its meaning, but the actual experience, the actual surrender itself, it's like there's no bottom to it. Surrender is a real sacrifice of the egoic mind. And that's always much harder than we'd like to think it is. Because it's an over and over again experience. It's not a one-time affair. If there is any practice in spirituality, it's the practice of sacrificing ego. And I'll say what I mean by ego, because there's lots of different definitions and descriptions of ego, or usages of the word. But it's the sacrifice of that over and over again. So what do I mean by ego? When I speak about ego, I'm really talking about the divisive nature of mind. Yeah? That part of the mind that divides its experience. And again, it can be very obvious or it can be very subtle, but it's kind of a mechanism that's always in place. This is good, this is bad, I like this, I don't like this. Yeah, it's a constant taking a picture of reality. It's very fast, a snapshot of reality, and making an assessment. And that assessment is always compared, again this happens very fast, compared to a previous experience. So it's either better or worse than what was experienced before. Yes, there's always this kind of comparison, this categorizing. And that's a very necessary part of the function of ego. But it's become our primary way of operating. And that's not so helpful. And it's that part of the mind, the egoic mind, the divisive mind, that is or the invitation of awakening, the invitation of, you can call it awakening or enlightenment, however you want to call it, waking up out of the dream of separation, maybe that's a more accurate way to say it, waking up out of the dream of separation requires a sacrifice of the divisive mechanism of mind. Not just once, but over and over and over and over again. Now there's nowhere you can go that's better or worse than now for that sacrifice. Whatever appears now, and now, and now, and now, and now, and now, as you move through the world and this apparent three-dimensional reality, is precisely the place, the time, the space, the invitation for you to wake up out of the dream of separation. So, what I speak of in the book, Radical Awakening, is the invitation of life itself, however it appears, however horrible, however painful, however agonizing, however terrorizing. And I'm not necessarily speaking of the events of your life or the circumstances of your life. I'm talking about your inner experience, your inner reality, how you experience whatever is being experienced now and now and now. That's the doorway, that's the invitation, that's the call of life. So whether you're feeling depressed or anxious or panic-stricken or regretful or grief or whatever it is, whatever feeling is here, whatever emotion is here, whatever lightness or darkness, it's here because it's calling you home. It's not here to punish you. It's not here because you've done something wrong. It's not here because your life is wrong. It's not here because you're bad or unworthy or any of these things. It's here because it loves you. Life loves you. The darkest places are love in disguise. Love in disguise, because everything that appears in you as your experience is a call home to your true nature. I'll say it another way. Everything that appears in your experience now and now and now is here because it wants to come home to true nature. So if we look at it, that whatever is appearing in your life, let's say it's something difficult. And when I say life, I mean your inner experience of life, not necessarily the circumstance. Yeah? If you're experiencing a difficult or dark emotion or feeling, and perhaps it's one that keeps knocking on your door, it's here because it wants to come home. When I say it, I'm speaking about it as an it, because every energy that appears in you as your experience, you could say is a form. Just as you are a form, you are a body, you are a human being, you are a personality, you are a form, you appear as a form in this world. Everything that appears in you that may not have a physical body but appears as a feeling or as an emotion or a knot of pain or some kind of contractive energy, even though you may not be able to see it, you experience it, is also a form. It's an inner form. All forms yearn to come home to true nature. In other words, they yearn to come home or to dissolve in the ocean of consciousness, in formlessness. Everything is born and dies, everything is born out of consciousness and dies into consciousness, including the meal on your plate, including this building eventually will return to formlessness when it crumbles to dust. Everything that's born into this world eventually returns to formlessness. Some things more quickly and some things more slowly, and that's the same for all inner forms in the form of energies. In that sense, you could say that everything yearns to come home and dissolve into that formlessness. It's the ultimate coming home or resting. That's what we yearn for. We yearn to stop identifying with form. I am this or I am that. I am a personality. I am good. I am bad. I am successful. I am a failure. The yearning for spiritual awakening is the yearning to come home to an inner dimension of being that is formless. In other words, silence. The silence of being. The stillness of being. It's not necessarily an external silence or an external stillness, but an internal one. So in that sense, the forms that you experience as part of your inner experience also yearn to come home and dissolve into that silence. And they come home through you. They can't come home in any other way. They have to be experienced and opened to and welcomed and met. Because in that openness there is a dissolving of a contractive energy into a more open energy or a relaxed energy, and then that energy dissolves. So you're waking up out of the dream of separation. It's not about feeling better or more spiritual or more worthy or more uplifted or more anything. It's about dissolving the need to be anything other than this. Dissolving the need for anything to be rejected or denied or avoided. And in that, there's a deep relaxation. And in that deep relaxation, it's as if your form, the form of you, also relaxes and opens, and in some ways the boundaries of that you dissolve. You become permeable. You become unbounded. And in that permeability and unboundedness, whatever appears in life can pass through you more quickly and more effortlessly and more fluidly. It doesn't stick. It sticks to you when you are resisting or rejecting or avoiding or clinging. And this is available now. Like demythologizing spirituality or enlightenment, this mythical place of one day I will be enlightened, one day I will be awakened if I do this, this, this and this. You don't even know what it is that you need to do, but there's some kind of idea that something needs to be done here or something needs to be found. There's nothing to be found. It's not a gain, it's a loss. It's a loss of the need for anything to be other than how it is. Brings you into deep intimacy with life. Not life as you think it should be, but as it is. Not the circumstances of your life, that's irrelevant, but your inner experience. Your outer circumstances can also change in alignment with that, but that's not for you to worry about at this stage. The inner experience, not the outer reality. Now, I don't often speak about my story, but perhaps I'll say a little bit about that, because I do speak about it in the book. And if there's any questions that are relevant, we can open up the conversation. I don't speak about my story because in some ways it's like a dream. It's not what's happening now and here, so it's like I have to delve into the memory banks and pull something out, and every time I go back in it looks slightly different, so the story is slightly different. But bringing some of that into what's being spoken of here this evening, I really was one of those people that was one day my life will be perfect, one day I will be happy, one day I will be enlightened, one day I will be finally at peace, and so on and so forth. Somehow over time, life battered that belief out of me, and kind of in sort of increments I kind of gave up in some ways, gave up seeking anything, gave up chasing anything, certainly on the outside. But on the inside there was a subtle seeking. There was a subtle seeking for, I didn't really know what it was. I can only say now, looking back, love, wholeness, kind of fulfillment that had nothing to do with what I did in the world or didn't do in the world, or what I had in the world or didn't have in the world. All that had been surrendered. But it was a very subtle movement. I noticed it when I lived on my own for some time. And I would get up and make a cup of tea. Very English thing to do. As soon as there's a gap in the day, make a cup of tea. Or I would go to my bookshelf, which was quite substantial, and pick up a spiritual book. Nothing wrong with that. But I noticed that those times when that happened, which was pretty often, was an avoidance tactic, and a very, very, very subtle one. Because there's no harm in making a cup of tea, and there's no harm in reading a spiritual book, especially when you live on your own and you have plenty of time on your hands. But I noticed the avoidance tactic, and I noticed that what was being avoided was a terror of aloneness. And I don't mean the kind of aloneness of living on your own. That was fine. In fact, I enjoyed that solitude. It was a deeper aloneness. It was an aloneness that had a thread of remembrance, a whisper from my very, very young, well, not that young, but in my 20s, where I would very often move towards a very dark space. A dark space which was, in those days, expressed as a suicidal tendency. Now, that was nothing like that 20, 25 years later. But that inner terror had a whisper of the same impetus. What does that mean? It just meant that in noticing that terror consciously, which had not been met, if you like, or been aware of consciously before, I was able to face it. And by facing it, I simply stopped following any distractive movement of the mind. Instead of getting up and making a cup of tea, instead of getting up and getting a book, in those moments, I stopped. And although it appears that the stopping was an external action, it was actually an internal one. I stopped following the seeking mechanism of mind, that part of the egoic mind that was seeking something in order to find fulfillment. Seeking mechanism. And I just stopped. And I physically stopped and sat, and I mentally stopped. And in that stopping, that was a surrender. It wasn't a surrender in the sense that I set out to do surrender, or have any spiritual idea of this leading anywhere or doing anything. I just stopped. Because all the other movements had not really worked out. They were futile. They were just repetitive. And in that stopping was such a surrender, because it was very innocent, and it had no agenda, it had no expectation of an outcome. It wasn't the kind of surrender that said, well, if I surrender, I'll be free, or I'll be enlightened, or I'll whatever. It was simply just stop. And in that innocence, and in that place of no agenda, it was as if there was a death. A death of that very seeking mechanism. A death of that part of self that was identified with that seeking mechanism. And it was very much like falling into an abyss, an unknown space without a bottom to it, without an end to it. There was no landing place. There was no safety net. It's like falling without a safety net. Something happened in that. Not only was there a death, but there was also a merging or a recognition of the absolute oneness of everything. Not as an idea or a concept, but as a very, very felt sense. I know that something happened because from that point on there was no more fear, there was no more terror, and there was no sense of being alone or abandoned ever again. Ever. So something radically transformed. I also noticed that there was a great awareness after that of, because there's still a human being that operates in the world, and there's still a movement that happens in the world, I noticed that if there was any sense internally of moving away from that absolute surrender, which didn't need to happen again, but was almost consciously being surfed, then it's like being pulled off that razor's edge. You're like surfing a wave. So it's almost like I had to stay very softly and naturally and innocently on that wave, on that edge, which is the edge of presence and openness. Presence and openness. Presence and openness. And I found that actually that happened very, very easily and very naturally. But I was also aware that it is something almost like a practice that we can live from that place over and over and over and over again. Sometimes it appears to be effortless, and sometimes it appears to be more of an effort. Eventually it becomes effortless. Because what's happening, as I understood it over time, as it started to integrate, is that we're turning our allegiance, our devotion, away from the divisive movement of mind, which is what usually happens, that's at the forefront. We're turning our allegiance away from divisive movement of mind and resting in the verticality of being over and over again. We're giving our allegiance to something much more true than the divisive mind. Something much deeper and closer and more intimate and more real. And when I say real, because it's unchanging. That inner dimension of being is unchanging. It's not dependent on your circumstances. It's not dependent on the appearance of your life. It's not dependent on your personality and whether you're good or bad, worthy or unworthy, successful or a failure, or happy or sad. It's not dependent on that. That's where freedom lies. Now, does it happen in one fell swoop? Which is what we like to think, that somebody comes along and pats us on the head and we're enlightened. Or does it happen gradually? Or does it happen in stages? Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. It happens like a flower that opens its petals one at a time. That's a gentle unfoldment that can happen because you are consciously turning your allegiance away from the divisive movement of mind to the verticality of being, over and over again. The petals start to open, not when you say they should, not according to your agenda, but in their own time. It's the inevitable flowering or blooming of awakeness in you. But you're doing some work, you're making some effort. You're riding the wave, you're surfing the edge. And maybe there comes a moment, a time, where you look back and the whole flower has opened. What grace! How did that happen? You can't pin it on any particular moment or situation or teacher or book. It's just unfolded. Or maybe there is just one more opening, one more petal that comes, and that's the one that does it. And then you go, oh, that was it. Enlightenment happened, or awakening happened at that moment in time. But actually there was something else going on behind that, before that, prior to that assisted the process. So yes, it's gradual, and yes, it's sudden. And it's really not up to you to decide which. But it is up to you to choose to turn your allegiance to that which is true. Come what may, whatever is here, whether the waves are stormy or the waves are calm. And just because the waves are stormy doesn't mean you're bad. or done something wrong, or aren't spiritual enough. That's simply the way life moves through you. You cannot control that. For some people, the waves are stormier than for others. There's no point trying to find out why. You won't get the answers. And the answers are irrelevant. It doesn't help. Simply open to that storm, because that storm is here to call you home and to call itself home. Yeah? To call itself home back to the ocean, because the waves are the ocean, they're inseparable. And to call you home into the unboundedness of being, which is the ocean of consciousness, which is who you are. In that way, life and you become one. There is no more separation. If there is no more separation, there is no fear. There is no need to look for anything. How can you look for anything when you are everything? It's all in you. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to find. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing to lose. So this oneness, this that I'm speaking of or pointing to, it's not mystical, it's not out here, it's not transcendent, it's right here. It's right here. It kind of changes everything and changes nothing. You still go on living as a human being, with all the horror and pain and agony of that, and all the beauty of that, and all the tragedy of that, and all the joy of that, all the ups and downs. So in that sense, nothing changes. But in a very different sense, everything changes. Everything changes because there is no more separation. There is no more seeking. You are free. You are free of that. And the thing that imprisons us is the seeking mind that always wants something more or better or different or more spiritual or more free or more this or more that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying seeking is part of the process. Without seeking, nothing changes. So in some ways, that's there, yeah? It's here. But I'm saying it's... Say again, sorry? Seeking wants to get something. Seeking is a addictive tendency to want something in order to be fulfilled, and when that fulfillment comes, whether it's a new car or a new pair of shoes or a piece of cake or a new relationship or falling in love or finding a spiritual teacher or having an awakened experience, there is fulfillment, and then it's not real fulfillment. It can't be, because fulfillment isn't found in anything, in any form. Then there's disillusionment, and then the whole seeking mechanism starts again. That's the addictive mechanism, the egoic mind. It's always moving towards something in order to gain something, in order to feel fulfilled and feel complete. But it cannot bring completeness because you are already complete. And then it starts again. So in that sense, that seeking mechanism at some point has to be seen through. Seen through for the futile attempt for true fulfillment, true wholeness. However, the seeking that sets you off, let's say on a spiritual search, the spiritual seeking, by reading books or coming to talks or going to meet a master or going to India, whatever it is, or finding a method or a meditation practice, serves a purpose. It's the catalyst for transformation, for waking up out of the dream of separation. At some point on that journey, that seeking mechanism must be seen for what it is, the addictive movement of mind. At some point, that has to be surrendered itself. I don't know what it is for you. No. Don't take my words and impose them upon your reality. You find out for yourself what's true. You find out for yourself. For me, was making a cup of tea an addiction? Have I never made a cup of tea since then? No, of course I have. It's not what you do on the surface, it's the inside. But what I noticed was that the times that I was making a cup of tea, at that particular phase of my life, not now, but then, was a distractive mechanism. Distractive, not destructive. Distraction, an avoidance tactic of something much deeper. A terror of being alone. A terror of meeting a deep sense of abandonment that was part of my story, but we each carry that in some form or another as the wound of separation. When consciousness descends into form, there is a wound of separation. When you come out of the womb, there's a wound of separation. We're born into form, we're separated from the oceanic oneness of consciousness. There's something universal in the human psyche. At some point, that has to be met. Maybe not now. Maybe not even in your lifetime, I don't know. But you find out, honestly and authentically, what is right for you. Is the seeking alive in you now, and there's something that supports transformation? Of course there is. I spent many years going to workshops and reading books and following teachers and sitting in talks. Would I say that was a waste of time? No. It's what led to the next and the next and the next growth. But at some point, the addictive mechanism must be seen for what it is. If you want true freedom, I'm talking about true freedom, not a gain, not a spiritual gain, and becoming more peaceful or following some kind of practice or feeling blissful or creating another sense of spiritual self out of it. True freedom. If that's what you're seeking, liberation from the suffering of egoic mind, if it has reached that point and it has to be ripe in you, then everything must be surrendered. I'm talking about a radical awakening, not a part-time awakening. Yes?
Because I feel it's so obvious to me that I'm completely terrified every day, and I'm fighting. I mean, desperately to just live, keep my life together, and I see the fertility of it completely, and I cannot work my life. So I mean, I can see it, but I cannot, like say, surrender. I couldn't. It's just so that terror, like say, of separation. I'm just empty. It's there all the time. So I'm walking along a cliff, and I just try. So then I attach it to a person, and I'm seeing it, and I completely. Now I'm attaching it to a person. It's just every day, one day, that person is there, you know. And I know it's completely futile. Like say, I know it, and I cannot, like say there's a choice, I feel there's no choice, I feel completely powerless.
Are you not exhausted?
It's exhausting,
Yes.
I'm completely exhausted. Completely.
When you are fully exhausted, you're not totally exhausted yet. No, when you are fully exhausted, you will give it up.
Yeah.
When you are fully exhausted, you will not care, let me rephrase that, you will be willing, shall I say, rather than not caring, you will be willing to die. Yeah? You will be willing to give up the identification, because some part of you is identifying with the part that is having that story. Yeah? You will be willing to give that up. And you won't know how, and no conceptualization or intellectualization of it will make any sense or have anything to do with it. It will be an inner dimension that opens up for you where everything is given to that. It's beyond words. Until that time comes.
I know. That makes it even worse.
Yeah,
because I know it
that's
makes
why.
it even worse.
Yes, that's why there is no method here. There is no practice here. There is no saying this is the way.
There's no way.
There is no way.
No,
There is
exactly.
only your authentic experience. You have to find out for yourself if you are willing to give it all up for freedom. If that is totally alive in you. And if the words speak to you, then that will, yeah. But if it doesn't matter. No one's better or worse.
It's just exhausting.
It's just whether you're exhausted with it, yeah. Whether there's so much internal suffering that, yeah, that you're burning with the fire, with the desire for freedom from that.
Why is it, I feel like when you say all this also before and everything wants to go back to formlessness, why is it there even form? If everything wants to be formless, why is there even form? I mean, it's so strange. I mean, why would all this be?
Because consciousness wants to know itself through form. It becomes conscious of itself through form. That's the purpose of us waking up. It's not for self. We don't wake up out of the dream of separation so that we feel better, although that's what we think we are. That's what sets us out on the whole search. Actually, it's consciousness that is waking up through us.
In what way?
When you wake up out of the dream of separation, you think initially, or enlightened or whatever, yeah? So then your life is better, your life is happier, your life is more peaceful, your life is whatever, yeah? Yeah. But actually, when you wake up out of the dream of separation, the whole story of me, it dissolves. It dissolves. And what happens is that life simply moves through you. Of course, there's still a sense of me sitting here and getting on the train. Of course that happens, but there's a bigger dimension inside of that in which there's no separation between the vehicle of me and life.
So it's like life wants to experience this and it has to use this form to experience.
Yes. So there's nothing better or worse between form and formlessness. It's not that form is yearning to come home to formlessness because it's better. It's simply the movement. Without form and formless, there wouldn't be any existence. If there was just form, yeah. Why? That's unanswerable. Yeah. The why of why existence exists is probably the biggest koan that we could ask ourselves. Yeah. We can go into theories and minds, yeah, to answer that. But if you really meet that question, it's unanswerable, and it blows the mind open. It shatters the conceptual mind, and in that shattering, all that's left is the mystery. Not the mystery of the mind looking for an answer, not that kind of mystery, but a very alive mystery of the tragedy and the glory of existence. It's kind of purposeless in one way and full of purpose in another way. Okay? One comes to a very paradoxical place in that unbounded space where the mind's not trying to understand it, but actually meeting it.
I can feel that even now, I mean that thing, paradoxical beauty in a way also of not paradox in a way, but then it's the terror in the same time. It's like because I'm clinging still to the form. I mean, I see it. I'm seeing it. That makes it so difficult because you see it. You cannot no longer
If you see
believe that
it,
you can go.
if you see it, you're close to it. Yeah, if you see it,
I see it.
you're close to seeing through it. Yeah, it gets more painful when you see it.
Right, just very
Yes, but the more painful it becomes,
there's no way out,
the more painful it becomes, then the more you're likely to give it up. Yes.
Help somebody who it's with my daughter. I mean, she's very mesmerized with what's in front of her, and yet she's just such a beautiful spirit. But that's destroying her life because she's having lots of difficulties, and she's declaring those as reality. And I try to tell her not. She says, yeah, I practice it, but she does it for 2 months, and then she's stuck again. And today she was very angry and all that. So, is there any way you can help somebody or not?
The only salvation is within you. Salvation, no, within you.
Or within you?
Yes. The attempt to save anyone else, help anyone else, or save anyone else, or save the world for that matter, is a misdirection of where true salvation lies. Salvation lies in you. It lies in you waking up to the light in you, to the oneness in you. When you are awake to your light, there is no need to do anything, to change anything. It's not a cop-out. It means that the light in you is the real power, is the real force. You become a beacon of light unto yourself and unto the world. That's far more powerful than trying to tell somebody or save somebody or help somebody. Because from that place, what moves in you, which might be some words, or it might not be anything, it might be silence, that will be more powerful. It will have more of a transmitting effect. The light in you is like a transmitter. It's not you that needs to save anyone. It's the light in you that does the work, if you like. That's true in any relationship. You've noticed when you try to change somebody or tell somebody or fix somebody or control somebody, or it doesn't work. Whether it's your mother, your father, your daughter, your son, your lover, your husband, your wife. It doesn't mean being a wet rag or a doormat. It doesn't mean being totally passive. It doesn't mean abdicating responsibility. That's what the mind likes to think. Well, if I don't help or do something or say something, then I'm abdicating responsibility. I'm not a good parent, or I'm not a good husband, or I'm not a good wife, or I'm not a good whatever, yeah? But it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you're coming from a divisive place in you. Be the light. Know yourself as oneness. I'm not talking about some kind of new age oneness or idea of oneness. The oneness that I've been speaking of, where everything is surrendered. The divisive movement of mind is surrendered into now and now and now. And then see what moves in you. It's far more powerful. There's a love in that is where it's an unbounded love, an unconditioned love. Yeah? It won't have conditions on your daughter. She may need to make mistakes. She may need to get lost. We all get lost. As we're born into form, we're lost. We're lost in form. That's the whole journey of being human. How beautiful and tragic that is. We're going to save everyone from the moment they're born and say, hang on, remember yourself as consciousness. Don't ever get lost in form. It's not possible. It's the journey. Love allows all of it. It allows the getting lost. It allows the stickiness, the identification, the brokenness, everything. And yet, it's so open, it's so unconditioned, it's so magnificent in that. It doesn't stick to it as well. You don't have to follow that with your own stickiness, yeah? That it has a power to it. It has a healing quality that is not about trying to fix anyone.
So I've had
Just to let you know, we're at time tomorrow,
Oh,
so
okay.
maybe this would be...
Okay.
so I had
And then one more.
my spirit left unexpectedly the afternoon. I had to go and lie down at home. It went up my body and joined with this huge light. And it was a light of oneness. It declared itself. That light and me were one. However, my life is still a huge, monstrous problem. So it was very powerful, and yet I'm still following and getting pulled by the other story.
That's where the work is, not in the mystical experience or out-of-body experience or any of that. Yeah. Here, now, over and over and over again, as you walk out the door, as you get on the train or whatever it is, as you speak to your daughter, as you think about it. It's even in the thinking. Notice what's happening. Become aware of should and shouldn't. She should be doing this. She shouldn't be doing that. That's divisive mind. Open. Open and feel your broken heart when you see your daughter getting lost in whatever she's getting lost in. And open. And keep opening in that. And don't get stuck on the story of it. Broken-heartedness has not got a story in it. When I say broken-hearted, I mean the heart that's broken wide, so open, so widely open, that it becomes unconditioned and unbounded. It's not a tragedy, it's not a loss. It's simply the openness of compassion. That's your job. And then you'll be the mother that she really needs. From that place, there may be something that you can say. There may be something you can do, but it will come from a very different place. It may surprise you in what it says. It may not even have to say anything. I tried for years to change my mother. Our relationship was hell until I stopped. Until I was just present with her. Present and open, even though she appeared to be a nightmare. That presence and openness changed something. Changed something in me. And then she could finally let go. The battle was let go of. Not because anybody changed their personality, not because she did what I wanted her to or said what I wanted her to, no. I stopped trying to change her. I was just present with her as she is.